In this example, the user indicates an issue with editing sketches. So let's take a look at the sketch and diagnose what's going on. I'm going to turn this sideways so I can fill up the screen here. The first thing that I do is I expand the origin and turn on the visibility of the origin center point, which I see is in this corner right here, and that may or may not be logical location depending on the design intent. The next thing that I'll do is I'll drag the red end of part marker up to right underneath sketch number 1, and I see sketch number 1 is a single line, and so if I drag this down below sketch number 2 and I'll right click on sketch 1, I'll turn off the visibility of sketch 1, and I see that this is the geometry on sketch 2. So it looks like that the intention was that this line on sketch 1 was supposed to be on sketch 2, or all of this geometry on sketch 2 was supposed to be on sketch 1. And then if I turn off the visibility of sketch 2 and I go down to sketch 3, I see that there's nothing on sketch 3. So I'm going to drag the end of part marker. I might just delete that the sketch 3. It looks like it was it wasn't even intended. So when you want to edit a sketch, you right click and you select edit sketch, and you have the geometry that's available on that sketch, but that's the only sketch that's available to edit. If you want to edit sketch 2, you right click and you edit sketch 2, and that's the geometry that you have available to edit. One of the things that I noticed right away is that this line is black, but some of the other geometry is not black. So if I start dragging geometry, I see that there is no dimension from here to here. I'm going to undo that. I also see that this line, it looks like it was intended to be horizontal. It doesn't stay horizontal. So go through and put geometry constraints on the geometry. And remember, I moved this thing. What's vertical, what's horizontal can be confusing in 3D. So I do a vertical constraint on that, and then coincident, I assume between here and here was the design intent. Notice that those lines turn black. They're now fully defined. So then I see that this line right here, it hasn't turned black, so I need the dimension of, and I'm going to do it from here back to the origin, and put in whatever the intended dimension is, and we see now that that one turns black. And then I need to locate this circle, and so we'll need 2 dimensions in to locate that circle. So I think the key is to know which sketch. Notice that sketch 1 is grayed out. I deleted sketch 3. Notice sketch 2 is highlighted here. You need to know which sketch you are currently editing. So if I finish that sketch, if I turn sketch 1, I'll turn the visibility of those 2 sketches back on again. This looks like it was the design intent, so I'm just going to go ahead and delete sketch 1. It doesn't even look like it was intention. Now notice that, actually let me undo that. Notice there's a thumbtack on sketch number 1. That tells me that it's fully constrained. There's no thumbtack on sketch number 2. I'm going to delete sketch number 1, and I want to find out why it's not fully constrained. So I'm going to edit that sketch, and it tells me down here, it says 5 dimensions are still needed, and I don't see right away where the missing constraints are. But if I come down here and I click on this show all degrees of freedom, I can see that there's some endpoints here that aren't constrained. So there's probably 2 lines over top of each other here, and it may be the same case down in here. So I'm going to turn that off again, and so I'm going to try to drag some of this geometry. And if I move this up here, and I'll get this, click on this line, and I'll try to move that. It's going to be a missing coincident constraint. So I can drag that down. So let's do coincident between this point and this arc, and then coincident between here and here. So yeah, it isn't enough to just make it tangent. You also need to make it coincident if you want it connected to that arc. And then if you want to trim off geometry, you could go ahead, and I assumed that the next step was to do some trimming, but I'm not going to do it because I don't really know what the next part of the design intent was. The other issues, we had some over here, and I'm suspecting that there are multiple lines over top of lines here. So I'm going to delete one of these lines. And I see, yes, there's another line here underneath that. So I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to do select other. And so I can go through, I can cycle through. So there's a curve, there's a curve, and there's a curve. I might want to move this out of the way here a little bit. Let's see if we can get it up here. And so this one, I want to delete that. So I'll select that and I'll delete it. I'm going to, and then there's another one there. So I actually got that one actually on the first selection. And it's putting this right on top of it makes it hard to find. That one's the good one. That one's I want to delete. That's the duplicate. I'll delete that one. And now when I turn on the show all degrees of freedom, it shows that there's still one more in here. There's a short one here. I'll delete that one. And so be careful about creating extra geometry, lines over top of lines. It now tells me that it's fully constrained. So again, when you want to edit a sketch, right click, edit that sketch. Whatever geometry you have in this sketch is only in that sketch.